Welcome back to the Storyboard special on retail realities. With us, Kishore Biani, Sanjay Nair of KKR India, S. Raghunandan and Rama Bijapurkar of Next Practice Retail. On this show, we've been trying to find out why the Indian retail sector needs foreign direct investment. We have a fair idea that modern retail chains need to scale up to thrive and survive, and that scale needs to be funded. Why is FDI being looked at as the main source of funds? Can't Indian entrepreneurs raise or borrow resources locally? Raghu, you want to give us a sense of why this seems to be the assumption?
If I look at scale, there are 2 or 3, 5 factors which will really impact us. One is money, second is people, third is getting real estate right, fourth is your whole supply chain and logistics, yeah, and fifth is what benefit are you providing to the consumer. Now, if you package all of this together with the kind of money that you need, I'm not sure that this will be an attractive opportunity for most Indian entrepreneurs. He
says it may not be an interesting opportunity. He also said before we went into the break that $5 billion or roughly thereabouts is what you would need in the front end, only in that hypermarket and food grocery segment. Is that number what you would agree with? Because the government in its policy says $100 million minimum investment.
Sanjay can throw more light on this, but there is he's only talking of the front end. But then there are allied industries like the real estate which develops. Then there is a whole back-end area where the investments would come about. They are not directly into retail, but indirectly, retail is fueling that demand for investment.
Just to the point of the $5 billion, I think the number is pretty understated because, you know, given that we don't have common infrastructure.
Even for just that category, it's understated.
Even for that category, because if you just combine the cash losses you have to incur, you go into the supply chain, and the fact is that you don't have good infrastructure and good quality infrastructure that is being built by the government or by any common carrier. Each one has to build his own. And, you know, I think the amount may be 3 or 4 times larger just in that category. But what's more important is that it's not just money, it's the kind of money that you need to build that. Okay, this is not going to be productive on day one. This is 7 to 10-year game. So while the number can be 20, 30 billion, it's the quality of capital that you need. And I think that's the challenge here.
So don't Indian entrepreneurs have this money, Mr. Biani, humor me, or is it difficult to borrow this money? Is it too prohibitive, the cost of borrowing? Do lenders not want to lend? Why does the source for this money seem to be foreign direct investment?
I think like Sanjay mentioned, it's a long-term money which India needs. It's not the short-term. Money is available, but it's very expensive. Money is available on short-term. You don't get long-term patience capital who understand the category, understand the sector, and invest with you on the long-term gains.
Okay, but there is also this presumption that a lot of Indian retailers have welcomed this move to open up to foreign direct investment, because at some point Indian entrepreneurs don't seem to want to build the business either domestically or globally, but want to sell out to the big global retailers who want to come in. What do you make of this assumption or this charge that's being made?
This is an assumption, but my understanding is you need a partner to scale up more faster. Today, every retailer is scaling up, whoever is in the business. But they are scaling up to their abilities and to their resources. If you get extra resources along with the science, I think you can scale up much, much faster because the base has been created. Everybody has created a significant base, or the learning has happened, and it's time to grow now, and that's the right time.
I just want to add that I think I think all the Kishore said was absolutely fine, but just think of where will you get this money from in India. Okay, the banks I don't think are adequately capacitized. Once infrastructure growth picks up again, they don't have enough capital to even finance that, okay? You have debt markets in India which are pretty dead. You have equity markets there which are sluggish, and you can see it for yourself. So I think the big challenge is where do you get the money from? And retail, unfortunately, the front end, at best what banks can lend is working capital, right? Real estate is not easy to lend. To build infrastructure is not easy. You need a very different kind of capital for that. So I think that there has to be some really innovative way of financing. And I can't think of anything right now, given that you have a huge fiscal account that takes away and preempts a lot of people's savings. You really have to go back to long-term equity capital, and that can come from strategics, it can come from private equity, it can come from entrepreneurs. And of course, there are pros and cons of each of that. That's why there is such a big deal about allowing, FDI.
So how attractive is the Indian retail sector to private equity firms like yours? Because I think a couple of years ago, you all did pick up a stake in Cafe Coffee Day, which I would say is in the retail sector, isn't it? So what are the things that you're looking at? Is it attractive if the government's policy goes through? And how disappointed are you that the government has, suspended the policy or held on to it or frozen it?
Retail is really an industry that private equity guys love, okay? And the reason is that it requires that kind of capital. It requires the expertise that private equity can bring in, given the experience they have overseas and in just a huge number of formats and categories. And again, back to the point of secular demand, it's an industry that you can, if it's run well and it's scaled up well, I think the returns can be quite phenomenal. And then you put in the context of Indian capital markets, where they're not adequately, enough well-listed retail companies, that there's a huge opportunity that's there to make money. Are we disappointed about FDI? I'm frankly not that disappointed, only because I just think that the timing wasn't right. So I just think it happened, didn't matter. But I think in the next year or so, it should happen. Otherwise, the entire industry is going to get hugely stymied, because nobody has that kind of capital unless you allow long-term foreign capital to come in. So I'm disappointed with the timing and the way it happened. But it is not the most imminent thing that needed to happen today, given the context of what's going on in India.
Right. Mr. Biyani, what kind of inflows will we see if this policy happens? Because you're one of the few listed stocks, and when we look at analyst reports, there's negative news that it's got, the FDI is on hold. So what kind of interest are you seeing, Mr. Biyani, in this industry?
I think the interest is interesting because 1.2 billion customers in this part of the world. I think India is one of the most aspirational consumers, which are growing and wanting to consume more. Secondly, I think always in retail business, the inorganic way of growing is always the better way of growing rather than the organic way, because the time taken to grow organically is much larger. So a lot of people believe in investing into already running enterprises. And thirdly, we believe there are many sectors which has not yet come in, like the home sector yet in India has not yet happened. And consumer durables, I think we are going to see much more new things happening there. And there are many other categories like e-commerce have just emerged. So there would be, I believe personally, that in the next 6, 7, 8 years, around $8 to $10 billion of capital inflow can happen in this sector.
If this policy goes through.
Absolutely.
Mr. Biyani, I was looking at some data that the government has put out. It says that in the 5 years that 51% FDI in single brand retail has been allowed, only $44.45 million have come in. That's 0.03% of total FDI inflows. Will this be a similar experience for multi-brand retail?
Not at all. I think single brand retail, also most of the money would have come into the luxury goods where people have opened 3 stores, 4 stores. I think multi-brand retail is a big one. And in fact, we have been asking the government why they can leave the food sector maybe for a later date, but the other sectors can definitely open up. So I think the money will be huge. I am told that one of the home retailers which wanted to come in would have invested close to $1 billion into the country, one single retailer.
Right.
Just one thing, in terms of your estimate of what can come in if multi-brand opened up, I think it's $20+ billion, not 8 to 10. It's much, because once you open it to the point that global retailers want to come in and the kind of opportunity in India, it'll be a very large number.
So this is all very good news for Raghu and Rama, isn't it?
Over 10 years or 15, over 10 years, I guess.
Much earlier.
Much earlier?
I think you need a lot of money and it will come in to build out the basic back end
Invest
first.
ahead of it,
yes.
right.
Although we were only talking of food and grocery. We didn't expand beyond food and grocery.
No, but multi-brand. I think multi-brand is, I suppose it covers a lot more categories.
Sure.
One quick last word from all of you.
You have to recognize the fact that modern retail is here to stay and good for the consumer as well as the vendors. The consumption patterns are changing and it can be a very attractive sector for the investors. Thirdly, the investment capital is not available in the country. We are capital deficit and we're definitely deficit this kind of capital. And therefore, really depends upon how you want to pace the growth. And I think if you want to grow in the next 5 years, which is not a long shot, you've got to open up imminently. The only point I made earlier, you don't have to do it next month or the month after next, but it's got to be on the agenda in the next 1 year.
Right. Mr. Biyani, what's your thought for us? The thought you want to leave us with as to why the Indian retail sector needs FDI?
I think consumption is equal to development, and consumption will lead to economic growth and prosperity in the country. I think if we consume value-added products and services, which modern retail can make it happen, we will see manufacturing coming up, we will see services sector growing, we'll see employment, we'll see overall economic activity which can ultimately boost our GDP.
All right. Rama, we'll give you the final word on behalf of Next Practice. What's your take after this conversation?
My biggest, most pleasant surprise is that even Kishore agrees with us that there is a science of scaling and a know-how that we actually need to get that FDI can bring, and it's not just about money. The other thing is that if you want the gainers to be far more than the losers, then you have to have scale. And if you don't have the scale, don't bother. So unless you open FDI, you're just doomed to go into a downward spiral. That's really my I'm always a bleeding heart consumer liberal. So I think that anything that helps people shop better for cheaper is actually a pretty good thing to have.
And we will be talking about the other stakeholders as the series progresses. So all the issues that have been raised in this debate are going to get addressed before people, before people think that we're going to leave it there. But on that note, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for watching. Next week, the future of the kiranas or the local grocers will be debated. Remember, some of the most vocal opposition to the further opening up of FDI in the retail sector has been about whether these kiranas will survive if foreign-owned modern retail chains are set up. Thank you for watching. We'll be back again same time next week.